In the quiet mountain town of Hartwell, along the rugged Ozark Trail, lived Benjamin Ben Carter, a third-generation butcher. His hands were scarred from years of work, but his heart remained good. Everyone trusted him, not just for meat, but for guidance. Ben raised his little sister, Elsie, after their parents passed in a wagon accident years before. At 16, Elsie helped in the shop, greeting customers with a brightness that softened even the hardest traveler. The year was 1902, a time when superstition traveled faster than news, and fear lived in the shadows of the mountains. And fear was coming to Hartwell. One storm-drenched night, a pair of hunters arrived at Ben's shop long after closing. They dragged in the carcass of a massive wild boar, a creature larger than any Ben had seen in the Ozarks. "We found it near the hollow," one whispered, eyeing the floor nervously. "The hollow?" Ben asked. "No one hunts there." "That's why we did," the hunter muttered. "Game's been scarce. Families starving." Ben sighed. He didn't scold them. Hunger made desperate men. He paid fairly, though the hunters fled as if chased by the storm itself. Ben and Elsie cleaned the carcass late into the night. The boar's flesh was oddly warm, even hours after death. But Ben chalked it up to adrenaline. His father always said a dying beast clung to life in mysterious ways. He never imagined what would happen next. The next morning, Ben laid cuts of fresh pork on the broad wooden counter. Elsie swept the front as the church bells chimed in the distance. Suddenly, thup, thup, thup. The meat on the table twitched. Elsie dropped her broom. Ben's eyes widened. It's just nerves, right?" Elsie whispered. Ben nodded, though his voice cracked. "Happens sometimes. Nothing to fear." But this wasn't sometimes, and the twitching wasn't subtle. It was rhythmic, purposeful. The meat quivered as though trying to stand. Words spread quickly, as things always did in Hartwell. Soon a crowd gathered. Mothers shielded their children. Old men crossed themselves. Whispers filled the store. Witchcraft. An omen. Something evil from the hollow. Pastor Ward arrived, grave as Sunday morning. "This is not natural, Ben. Dispose of it." "But it's good meat. Folks need—" "It is cursed," the pastor declared. "You must burn it." Ben hated waste. Every bone fed someone. In winter, waste could mean death, but fear outweighed reason. The town demanded action. Ben and Elsie carried the twitching cuts behind the shop and tossed them into the fire pit. Flames roared, but the meat didn't burn. That night, as rain pattered against the window, Elsie jolted awake. She had seen a vision in her sleep. A boy with tangled black hair, his eyes full of sorrow, calling out for help. He stood near a gnarled tree in the hollow, the exact place the hunters had mentioned. His voice echoed in her mind. "Not cursed. Taken." Elsie clutched her blanket, shivering. She didn't tell Ben. He already carried too much. The next morning, Widow Marlene, who lived far outside town, hobbled into the shop. Her hands shook as she spoke. "I heard you burned meat from the hollow." Ben frowned. "Ma'am, I don't know how you—" "Tell me," she insisted. "Did it move?" Ben hesitated, then nodded. Tears filled her eyes. "My son, Noah. He disappeared 3 nights ago. Last seen near the hollow." Ben's chest tightened. "He was just a boy. Only 14, she sobbed. "And the old stories say, if the spirit is trapped, the body may still try to come home." Elsie froze. Her dream. The boy. Noah. Superstition suddenly felt like truth. Ben tried to reason. "Widow Marlene, how could a boy be tied to a wild boar?" She swallowed hard. "When hunger comes, the cursed prey upon the lost." Ben wanted to dismiss the idea. But something inside him, a quiet fear, stretched awake. Elsie finally spoke up. "I saw your son," she whispered. "In a dream. He asked for help. The widow sobbed harder. Then he's still fighting. Ben rested a steady hand on the counter. Tell me everything you know. And she did. Stories of ancient spirits, beasts that weren't beasts, hunters who never returned, a tree that marked the boundary between the living and the lost. Ben didn't believe in monsters, but he did believe in families torn apart. More meat began to twitch, not just the boars, but every cut that came from the hollow. Travelers who tasted it fell ill with terrible nightmares. Pastor Ward confronted Ben publicly. You're bringing darkness upon us. Close the shop. Ben refused. He still believed someone could be helped. But that night, a rock shattered the front window. A note tied to it read, "We won't let you curse our children." Elsie tucked herself beside him, trembling. Ben held her close, guilt eating away at him. He had always protected the town. Now he was their enemy. Ben paced the shop floor into the early morning hours. Logic failed him. Superstition screamed. But a boy was missing. And if there was any chance, that this was connected, he couldn't ignore it. He strapped on his father's old hunting blade, packed lanterns, rope, and an axe. Then he turned to Elsie, who was already tying her boots. "You're not coming," he said firmly. "You need me," she shot back. "Besides, that boy, he called me." Ben knew better than to argue with Elsie when she used that quiet fire in her voice. Together, they stepped into the pre-dawn mist and headed for the hollow. The hollow was darker than even night should allow. Silence swallowed their footsteps. The air felt thick, like walking through someone's breath. Finally, they reached it. A towering twisted oak, its trunk blackened as if struck by hellfire. Bones, animal or human, they couldn't tell, littered the roots like offerings. Elsie grabbed Ben's hand. "Do you hear that?" At first, he didn't. Then, a faint voice like a heartbeat inside the wind. "Help me! Help me!" A shadow shifted behind the tree. Ben raised his lantern, heart pounding. Something, or someone, was waiting in the dark. Ben stepped forward, lantern shaking in his grip. Elsie clung to him as the shadow moved again. Then, a figure stumbled into the light. A boy, pale as winter moonlight, clothes torn, eyes hollow. "Noah," Elsie whispered. He nodded weakly, but behind his eyes fear raged like wildfire. "Please," he begged, "don't let it take me back." Ben knelt. "Who did this to you?" Noah didn't answer. Instead, his body jerked and his skin pulsed like the twitching meat. "Run!" he cried. Something howled in the darkness behind them, not a boar, not anything natural. Ben scooped the boy into his arms and turned toward town, but the hollow wasn't letting them go. Branches snapped, the earth trembled. A monstrous shape thundered toward them, tusks like curved scythes, eyes blazing with unnatural fury. The boar, the same one they butchered, the same one whose meat refused to die. Only now it wasn't a boar, it was a creature possessed. "Keep moving," Ben yelled. But Noah cried out, "It wants me. If I go back, my spirit will be lost forever." Elsie grabbed Ben's sleeve. "We have to fight." Ben planted himself between the children and the beast, gripping his father's hunting blade. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was a butcher, and butchers know precisely where to cut. The beast charged. Ben swung. Steel met flesh, sparks of red splashing the dirt. The creature shrieked, a sound that twisted the soul. With each hit, its body spasmed, like meat refusing death. But Ben pressed on. "Ben!" Elsie screamed. The beast's tusk carved his shoulder, tearing blood from muscle. Ben gritted his teeth, staying upright only through sheer will. Then Noah spoke a single word: heart. Ben understood instantly. Every creature, every cut, the heart held life. As the beast lunged again, Ben thrust his blade deep beneath its ribs. A roar rattled the trees, and the monster collapsed, twitching violently. Then lay still. Ben's knees buckled, the forest grew quiet. He thought it was over. He was wrong. Noah's body convulsed, face twisting in agony. Elsie grabbed his hand. "Hold on." A dark mist seeped from his mouth, drifting toward the dead beast. A sinister pull tied them like thread. Ben grabbed Noah's shoulders. "Stay with us." Through tears, Noah forced words out. "The hollow feeds on loneliness, fear, anyone who wanders too far." Elsie shook her head. "We're taking you home. You hear me?" But Noah stared into the darkness. "I'm still tied to it. My soul, part of the curse." The wind carried whispers again, thousands of trapped voices calling out. Ben realized Noah wasn't the only one lost. They made it back to Hartwell as dawn tinted the sky, but instead of welcoming them, the town recoiled in terror. Pastor Ward pointed a shaking finger. "That boy is tainted. He is not welcome here." Widow Marlene rushed to her son, embracing him despite his trembling skin. "He is my child," she cried. "You will not take him again." But the crowd took a step back, fear widening the gap. Ben, bleeding and exhausted, stepped forward. "This boy needs help. He needs us." Ward's voice boomed. "The hollow marks those it claims. If he stays, the curse stays." Torches were lit, lines drawn, hearts closed, and Elsie, eyes burning with fury, shouted, "You all talk about faith, so show some. Or has fear become your god?" Silence. But no one moved closer. Ben refused to let Hartwell abandon the boy. He turned to the widow. "We need to break the curse completely." Noah nodded weakly. "The tree? It must be cleansed. That's where the spirits are bound." Pastor Ward stepped forward. "If you do this, you do it alone." Ben looked around the town. People he'd fed, helped, healed in small, unseen ways. Not a single one stood with him. He looked at Elsie. She squeezed his hand. "You once told me courage is choosing what's right even when no one stands behind you." Ben smiled sadly. "Then let's be courageous." Noah, the widow, Ben, and Elsie. They set out for the hollow once more. At the twisted tree, Noah stood before the roots where countless bones lay. He spoke with a trembling voice. "I am not yours. I belong to love, not fear." Ben anointed the tree with lantern oil. Elsie scattered salt. Widow Marlene held her son tightly as the wind screamed like dying souls. Ben struck a match and tossed it onto the roots. Flames erupted, golden and fierce, lighting the hollow brighter than the sun. The trapped spirits wailed. Then, one by one, their cries softened. Noah collapsed. Elsie caught him before he hit the ground. The air, once sick and heavy, turned crisp, as though the hollow finally exhaled. The curse was breaking. As the tree burned, the dead beast's body, which they had dragged to the hollow, began to twitch wildly. The final soul was trying to escape. Ben stepped toward it, blade ready. But this time he didn't strike. He knelt beside the creature. "You can rest now." The beast twitched one last time, a gentle movement, almost like gratitude, before going still. Noah gasped, and a light, warm and brilliant, shimmered from his chest. The darkness inside him faded. And the boy smiled for the first time. News traveled fast. Hartwell gathered at the edge of the hollow, but this time, awe replaced fear. Pastor Ward looked upon Noah, noticing the peaceful glow in his face. Widow Marlene fell to her knees, thanking God aloud. Ben stood tall, despite his wounds, his clothes stained with blood and ash. Ward walked to him. "We owe you an apology for letting fear blind us." Ben nodded gently. "Sometimes fear is loud, but love must be louder." Elsie beamed with pride. For the first time, the town saw the truth. They had nearly abandoned one of their own. Winter came, but no child in Hartwell went hungry. Ben's shop was rebuilt with the community's hands. Noah became like a younger brother to Elsie, always helping in the store. And the meat? Fresh. Still. Peaceful. No more twitching. But Ben kept one small carving of the hollow's twisted tree, a reminder carved into his shop wall. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's protecting others even when fear stands in the way. Travelers along the Ozark Trail would hear the story, how a butcher saved a boy, how a town found its heart again. Some still whisper that the spirits of the hollow watch over the trail, not with hunger, but with gratitude. And every so often, when Ben cleaned his knives late at night, he'd swear he could hear a soft voice say, "Thank you."